Not a single one of us at any moment said, we're quitting, we're done, and we had to talk someone off the ledge. But we respected that every single one of us had a moment where we were like, I just need 5 minutes. And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to cry and I'm going to process, I'm going to be angry, and then I'll be back. And I'm going to get back to task and we're going to continue to go down this journey. And I think that's super important to pause for a moment on a journey and to reflect and learn and think and process. Because a lot of times we don't do that. But the important key there is to not sit in that moment for a really long time and then start to dwell, because then it spirals and we isolate ourselves and separate, and then we again start associating as quitters or failures, and we don't progress.
Welcome to the Beyond Speaking podcast from Premier Speakers Bureau, featuring in-depth conversations with the world's most in-demand keynote speakers.
Hi, I'm Brian Lord. This is the Beyond Speaking podcast. Our guest today is James Lawrence, also known as the Iron Cowboy, who has done incredible things, owner of multiple Guinness World Records, has biked to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, which is insane, has done the 50-50-50, which we'll get into, the 100 as well, Ironman triathlete, so many times over you can't even count it. And also has a great Ferris wheel adventure story to share too. But on top of all that, probably most impressive, happily married for 22 years now, 5 kids, and has done so much to help the world in terms of fighting childhood obesity, working with the new Underground Railroad to fight sex trafficking. And, that's probably the most important thing of all. So, James, thank you so much for coming on and being part of this.
Brian, thank you so much.
Where do you think this endurance streak comes from, this ability to suffer?
It's interesting. That's a great question because, we live in a day and time where people look at headlines and make assumptions. And they see these headlines and like, oh, that guy's just genetically gifted. And so I kind of bought into that belief when everyone was telling me that. And finally I went down and got all the genetic tests done, and I sat my kids down and I'm like, get ready. I'm going to tell you the gift I gave you at birth. And I opened it up and I started to read, and it said, you're an average white Canadian. and so there's literally nothing in my genetic code or makeup that separates me from anybody else, but it's how we show up over a long period of time. And I say all the time, the secret to success is doing a lot of little things consistently over that long period of time. And so, I'm not genetically gifted, and my journey started very humbly with a 4-mile fun run. And I remember I'm in the middle of this thing in my 20s, and I was physically fit. I grew up a wrestler, and I'm running this thing, and I look over and I'm like, those are moms pushing their kids in strollers that are passing me. And it was kind of a defining moment. And after the race, my wife lovingly told me I was pathetic. And it kind of kickstarted this whole thing. And I did a marathon and I hated it. And I had a decision in that moment. I was like, I can either let this define me or I can try to overcome it. And that kind of kickstarted this whole crazy journey of over a decade of some world records and some, fundraising and really pushing the boundaries of physical and mental capacity.
And, the first one you talk about isn't even an endurance race that we would think of. It was something else completely different at the Calgary Stampede, which is big. So tell us about that.
Yeah. I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And Calgary's world famous for the Calgary Stampede. And it's the one of the largest rodeo stops. It's rides, it's food, it's concerts, it's chuck wagon races. And I got to go every single year. And I found myself kind of at that crossroads in life, early 20s, figuring out, what do I want to do? Who do I want to be? And I heard this radio contest announced. And they said, we want to find out who can ride the giant Ferris wheel for the entire 10 days of the Stampede. And you got two 10-minute breaks a day for food and bathroom, nothing else. And I said, I can do that. I'm mentally tough. And so I got on the ride. And about halfway through, I got fired from my job. And so I had this incentive to stick this thing out. And ultimately, I won the contest and won the cash prize, had some free time, and hitchhiked a ride to Utah to visit one friend I had there. And that moment kind of changed my entire life. Met my wife, like you said, married 22 years. It's been interesting. I look back on that experience now, and I wonder, because it really wasn't that hard for me. And I question, like, why couldn't everybody do that? And I've really learned it as I've traveled around the world and spoken in 51 different countries, that as humans we're getting in our own way, and it's the conversations we're losing with ourselves. and we're not comfortable with that alone, quiet time where we just are talking to ourselves. And that was really a good realization for me. And now that's become our whole purpose and our goal is to help people start winning those conversations and changing the trajectory of their lives, getting out of their own way so that they can achieve whatever their version of impossible is.
One of the things I find interesting is when you're talking about doing these amazing things, doing 50 Ironmans in 50 days in 50 days, there's the process that leads up to it. So you're just talking about that mental process, because before you get to the whole physical thing, which is crazy, you have to do that mental thing. So when you're starting off the mental process of doing something difficult, what does that look like?
Yeah, for me, it's about creating small wins and creating momentum. And I'll be honest, January 1st is my least favorite day of the year, because everybody comes out and they're all excited and they do this big laundry list of things they're going to be perfect at to change their world. And it's great, but we approach it wrong, because as humans, we're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes. And as soon as we fail, we abandon the whole thing and then start associating ourselves as a failure. And so in order to start winning in life and with these big challenges, you can't go from 0 to 100. Don't leave the event and set the biggest goal that scares you and try to tackle it. Now, it's okay to set that big goal, but respect the process along the way, and that there's going to be stepping stones and learnings and failures and setbacks along that way. And my advice to everybody is like, look, I want you to be great, but let's start small. Let's start creating success. Let's start creating those wins. And, one of the greatest studies I've ever heard was about a gentleman who was going to the gym. It was New Year's. He was going to change his life. And I'm going to go 6 days a week for 2 hours. And he got the advice, look, you can go to the gym for 5 minutes today. And that's it. When 5 minutes is up, you have to leave. And he's like, I'm not going to reach my goals by going to the gym for 5 minutes. And the interesting thing about that is after he goes to the gym for 5 minutes every day, it's been 2 weeks. The one thing that's changed is the way he thinks about his journey. Because now he can say, I'm a gym goer, right? And then he ups it and goes 10 minutes a day and 15 minutes a day. And then over the year, his life changed because he's now showing up and he's changing the way he thinks, which affects the rest of this, because now he associates himself as that. So the advice I give to people to begin their mental journey, let's start small. Let's start to create wins in that momentum, and that success will start to follow. And you can't skip all those steps and gain momentum, because when you get to that moment where you're backed into the corner and it's dark and you feel alone, you have to be able to look at your body of work and draw from that and have that experience to get up. Because I just shared with you guys off camera that on day 59 of the Conquer 100, I was in a really violent bike accident where I got knocked unconscious and eventually found out that I had broken my back in that accident and had to do 41 Ironmans with a broken back. But the only reason I could overcome that moment and continue is because I knew that I could shift and choose where I put my focus, but I had the experience of 10 to 15 years for that moment that prepared me to continue onto that journey and overcome. You can't handle that chaotic moment for the first time without intentionally becoming uncomfortable over a long period of time. And so that's really how you start, and you want to start to create that momentum and those success and those wins along the way. And understand you're not going to be perfect, and the goal is to just chalk up more wins than losses. Losses are going to happen. Those are learning moments. But chalk up more wins and more losses and create that momentum.
One of the most things you're famous for is doing the 50-50-50, which you mentioned, and the 100, which I don't know as much about. With the 50-50-50, I know a lot of times, we're coming out of COVID. A lot of people are experiencing a lot of their darkest moments. What are some of the darkest moments? So I guess maybe set the stage of what the 50-50-50 is, but then also maybe talk about what some of the darkest moments were and how you dealt with them.
Yeah, so the 50-50-50, so all the way back to the beginning, started with running, found triathlon, found Ironman distance. So an Ironman triathlon is a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, followed by a 26.2 mile marathon run, total of 140.6 miles. NBC Sports calls it the most difficult, challenging single day in sports. And at the beginning of my journey, I just wanted to do one. And then as we progressed and broke multiple world records, and it led us to believe that we could do 50 consecutive Ironmans in 50 different states. And now looking back on it, it was completely crazy. It's mind-blowing. I don't know how we got through it because it's so logistics heavy. You start in Hawaii, you go to
plus,
Alaska.
I can't imagine
5 kids.
5 kids.
Yeah, 5
Just
kids.
if you're just like nothing, all we're gonna do is go eat some.
Go have an ice cream every day in 50 states in 50 days.
We
right?
could accomplish that.
It's crazy. So now you're putting on an iron distance event. You're bringing your kids with you, and so that became one of the hardest things, is managing the unknown every single day. And the journey didn't get easier. We just got better, and we got stronger, and we evolved and learned how to navigate all these different things. And so the hardest thing is being okay that things are going to happen on the journey that we can't anticipate, we don't know, and that we ultimately become master problem solvers on that journey. And it was interesting because there was myself, my wife, 2 really close friends that we called the wingmen, and then my 5 kids. That was our team. And a couple of other like key people that were running some stuff from home. But ultimately, not a single one of us at any moment said, we're quitting, we're done, and we had to talk someone off the ledge. But we respected that every single one of us had a moment where we were like, I just need 5 minutes. And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to cry and I'm going to process. I'm going to be angry, and then I'll be back. And I'm going to get back to task, and we're going to continue to go down this journey. And I think that's super important to pause for a moment on a journey and to reflect and learn and think and process. And because a lot of times we don't do that. But the important key there is to not sit in that moment for a really long time and then start to dwell, because then it spirals and we isolate ourselves and separate, and then we again start associating as quitters or failures, and we don't progress. And so I think it was really powerful that our entire team, although it was small, that the entire team bought into this belief that like, no, there is no option but continuing on. We're going to become master problem solvers, but we are each individually going to take moments and just pause, process, cry, and then get back on task.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, if you watch the, for those watching, listening, it's on, I watched it on Peacock. I know it's on Amazon Prime. It's been around a lot of different things. There's a time, I think it was on day 30, so Ironman 30 in
Connecticut.
Where you just like
the moment.
Pull over, and it's just you just like, pull off the side of the road on the bike and just kind of have, like just breaking down and have that tough time. It
was an interesting moment. And, when you're on a journey, you think this cannot get any worse than it is. And I really, I kind of call this be perfect for 1 second. And we get overwhelmed with the enormity of something. And in that moment in Connecticut, as I was like crying on the side of the road on this patch of grass, I could not conceptualize doing 20 more consecutive days. Like I just couldn't. But then I had a realization in that moment. I'm like, I can get up and turn the pedals over one time. It's not going to kill me. I can just turn them over one time. And one of my favorite words now is catastrophizing. And what that means is we look into the future, worst case scenario, and then we live there and we dwell on it. And have you ever had that conversation or argument with a spouse or a friend, and then you leave that argument and you yourself continue that argument in your head, and I said this, and if she said this, I'm going to say this, and that person's out at lunch now having a good time and they've moved on. But we sit in this moment and we stew, and it's this fictional worst case scenario that we're creating in our minds. And the best thing we can do is to like come back to present and focus on the one thing that's going to change or move the needle or allow us to progress. And for me in that moment is that realization that was like, I can turn the pedals over one time. And for those last 20 days of that campaign, that's what I focused on. One swim stroke, one pedal stroke, one step. And when you look at the data, those last 20 were my fastest of the entire campaign. And on day 50 in Utah, then 11:32 Ironman, we went under 7-minute miles for the marathon. And it was our fastest of all 50.
Wow.
And it was because I stopped catastrophizing. I trusted in my team. I allowed them to be great what they were great at and me be great what I'm great at. And together we were great as a team. And it ultimately allowed us to get to that moment. And literally those last 20 were our fastest of the entire campaign in a journey where they said it would be impossible.
Yeah.
And then again, the 100's a whole nother ball.
All right. So you've just done this crazy thing of the 100, of the 50-50-50. One of my favorite moments of that, so I want to get onto the 100, but one of my favorite moments of that is at the end. So somebody special came along to run, I think, a 5K, 5 5Ks in a day.
Yeah.
And tell us about that.
Yeah. So do you know this story?
I think so. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, one of the things we did, we were raising money for childhood obesity. We're the first generation ever where the parents are slated to outlive the kids. And that's tragic. And at the time of the 50, my oldest daughter was 12. And we were doing a 5K every single day to raise money for charity. And my daughter puts up her hand and she says, I'm going to run all 55Ks with you. Well, we're deep into the journey, and number 66, she shows up and she puts on a race belt and she's like, I want to do 5K with Team Iron Cowboy. And so ultimately she gets on the start line and is quickly overwhelmed and has to walk. And ends up being the last person to cross the finish line. And so I saw her finish and I ran up to her and I said, hey, congratulations. How was that? And she says, that was the hardest thing I've ever done. And what she said next, I'll never forget. She said, can I do that again tomorrow? And I said, yes, you just have to show up. And she showed up the next day and got on the start line, and the same thing happened. She was overwhelmed and ended up being the last person. I ran up to her again and I said, tell me, how was it today? And she said, well, that was the hardest thing I've ever done. Please, can I join you tomorrow? And I'm like, yes, you just have to show up. And for 5 days, she showed up. She did the hardest thing she could think of. And on that last day, she was still last. But her head was up. She was proud because she was facing her fears and her demons every single day. And so on that last day, I ran up to her and I gave her a big hug. And I said, Mom, I'm so proud of you. It was my mom. And my mom just wanted to run 5K with her son and has battled obesity her entire life. Now, the lesson I learned in that moment was that my mom's hard was 5Ks. My daughter's hard was 55Ks. My hard was 50 Ironmans. Everybody's hard is different. And we all have gotten to this point in our lives with different perspectives and experiences and perceptions. And as a society, we're quick to judge someone in this very moment, this snapshot, not knowing everything that brought them to this moment. And I promise you, there's somebody listening to this right now, their heart's going to be waking up tomorrow and starting their day. And we all have an opportunity as humans to have a little bit more kindness, a little bit more empathy, and a little bit more understanding, hopefully for someone's journey that's unique to them. We all have an opportunity to change someone's life with a simple act, possibly save their life. And so I'm so grateful for my family's involvement, my mom's struggles, my daughter's willingness. It's been an amazing journey of learning and growth.
So and I love that story. That's why I want to make sure that you're able to share.
It's in the documentary.
Yeah, it's in the documentary,
and I do tell it from stage. So yeah, it's fun. It's a gasp moment from stage. It's a lot of fun for me to do. I love it.
So you've done this incredibly difficult thing, and you decided to do 100, and I don't know how many states you did it in, but you did
one location, all Utah. Okay. Because the reason I set out on the 50 originally was how many consecutive Ironmans can I do?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't get to find that out because of chaos and logistics and mistakes we made because it was the first time anybody had ever done something like this. Yeah. And so, when the pandemic hit, dude, it changed the world, especially the speaking industry and the racing industry. Like, our calendars got cleaned in 48 hours. And we were like, again, now what? And it was interesting because I'd always wanted to redo the 50, but never wanted to redo the 50 because of logistics and the chaos and the confusion and the travel and I didn't want to displace my family again because they were now older. It was 6 years since the 50. And so I thought to myself, okay, look, if I can remove chaos, if I can put systems and team in place, can we double what everybody thought was impossible? Could we defy logic? And that's what put this whole thing in motion. And with some free time, I get a little bit dangerous in my mind. and so I sat my wife down and I said, look, I really got this impression that we need to do this. And at the time we had 4 teenage girls, and my wife has this passion, and rightfully so, about human and sex trafficking, and it was really in our face about it. And there was a local Utah charity that does these operations to free humans. And so I was like, I want to do this. I want to reset my own history. I want to learn from my mistakes. I want to do it better, because I truly think that's the point in life, is to learn, take missteps, learn from them, and apply them to our future selves to eventually find our ultimate version. You hear Ed Milet say all the time, like, I think our biggest regret is going to be getting to the finish line and realize we didn't catch the best version of who we are. And I love that. And so for me, I'm like, I got to try this. I got to show up. And so I talked to the two wingmen. We put the band back together, if you would. And on March 1st, 2021, we set out on our journey to do 100 consecutive Ironmans, remote location, remove the chaos, 140.6 miles a day for a quarter of a year, no days off. And we learned really quick that still involved a lot of chaos, a lot of confusion, and there were so many lessons learned during that, and a lot of amazing experiences. But ultimately, we raised over $1 million for the charity in doing so, and I learned a lot about myself, a lot about my team. And it was amazing to see the community from around the country and the world to come out and support this effort and to just want to be part of it for one day. And I'm grateful that my wife, Sunny, said yes. And the two wingmen allowed me to tackle this challenge and support me every single day. One of them is a great runner and one of them is a great cyclist, and ultimately did all 100 marathons with me and all 100 rides with me. Wow. And so it was a huge group effort. I'm not the Iron Cowboy. We are the Iron Cowboy. And I one of the biggest things I talk about and preach from stage is nothing great is ever accomplished on our own. And I truly believe that. I believe that the mountaintop of success is flat, and the more people you can bring with you, the happier and less lonely you'll be.
So, you talk a lot about this, that afterwards, after that 100, you really went through a lot of mental challenges. Right now, one of the biggest topics in the corporate world is mental health, how to deal with those things. What did you learn about yourself? What advice would you give others when they're going through these extreme mental challenges?
Yeah, the body and the mind specifically are so powerful. And I remember the documentary crew, we filmed the whole thing. I remember the documentary crew on day 98 or something, they said, hey, how many of these do you think you could do? Like you're in a groove, you're in a rhythm, you're on fire. And I instantly, no hesitation, I could do 200. And then when the campaign was over, it was a massive letdown because you're all in, you're giving it everything you've got. It's your only purpose in the moment. You're trying to do everything you can for the team and your family and yourself and push boundaries and really give hope to people that are suffering. And I had a really hard time functioning. I started to get filled with anxiety and depression, and the power of the mind, I learned that it was protecting me from all the trauma and everything that we were doing. And day one, after the campaign, my brain said, okay, I did my job, but now I'm going to let you feel everything that's happened. I'm sorry. And it took me 2 years to recover from that letdown, that moment. And what was fascinating is that the brain is malleable, and it believed I was going to do an Ironman every single day for the rest of my life. And it was protecting me from that. And we had some incidences, some crashes, some concussions, and my brain literally got stuck in fight or flight protection mode. And I couldn't get to parasympathetic, and we tested my eye movements, and they're supposed to be X, and they were in the millions. And that was exhausting, and I couldn't function. And so I really gained some compassion and empathy for those that are struggling. And because I've really gone through my life very optimistic, I'm a super positive person. And then for the past 2 years, I've really experienced that sadness and that depression, and it was neurological. And I reached out to some experts, and how do I overcome this? And it became community and support, and I found some really great tools and resources. And eventually we rewired the neurological pathways of my brain through a lot of effort, and got me back to parasympathetic where I could function again. And in fact, I never thought I'd race again. I thought my career was over, and I'm thrilled to say that this year, 2023, I'm racing in 2 world championships, and I'm back. I'm super excited. But yeah, the power of the brain is so powerful, both if we put ourselves and surround ourselves with toxicity, that's the direction we're going to go. And then if we realize that and can shift the course, we can also adapt and evolve and become extraordinary. And everybody always asks me what's next. And I'm truly satisfied. And I think what's next for me is to figure out how to live to 100, be a centurion, and be the first person to do an Ironman as a centurion.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive. You kind of finish up here. I know you're a proud husband with Sonny and proud father of 5. What do you want your kids to learn the most from these journeys they've been on with you?
Yeah, it's been amazing. I say all the time, like, children are a product of our environments. Man, and I truly believe that we have kids to help us. They are our teachers, right? They're who they are, and our job is just like give them grounding anchors and principles and respect and things like that. But they're going to be who they're going to be. And it's been amazing for me to watch them. And the kids have been involved with this entire journey. They were heavily involved in the 50, and my oldest daughter ran the entire campaign for the 100. And I'm just so proud of them. We've never really had rules in our home. We've just set expectations. And Sonny and I are far from perfect, but we just try to show up every single day and be that example to them. Kids are sponges, man. They're watching you, even though you may not think they are. So be careful what you do. But I've just been so proud because they do. They show up. And my 2 oldest daughters, actually this weekend, I'm flying from here to Vegas, and they're running their very first marathon. And neither of them enjoy running, but they were like, this is a challenge. We know it'll help us grow and it'll benefit our lives. So we're going to take on this challenge. And I couldn't be more excited and proud as a father to be there tomorrow to watch them cross that finish line. Because they've done the work and they've showed up. And that's one thing that they've learned is like, you can't expect things in life without showing up, and results don't come fast, and they're not entitled to anything. And they believe, and because of going through this journey with us, that they have to show up, they have to be consistent, they have to make sacrifices. But on the other side of that comes great reward. And it's been super gratifying. I've got 5 really good kids. It's all my wife's fault. She's super engaged with them, and has just done a really great job communicating, loving, and letting them be who they are.
Well, James, thank you so much for coming on and being part of this podcast. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Brian.
So for those watching and listening, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Also go to premierspeakers.com and check out James Lawrence and Iron Cowboy information there. So James, thank you once again for coming on to the Beyond Speaking podcast.
Thank you for joining us for the Beyond Speaking podcast. To learn more about today's guest, visit premierspeakers.com. Make sure to subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen.